At a farm auction outside Glasgow, Kentucky, in November of 1993, a 13-year-old girl walked up to an old red tractor carrying a paper grocery sack. The men around her saw a child. The bank saw one more estate file to close. The auctioneer saw Lot 27, a tired machine with sun-faded paint and a cracked seat. But nobody saw the black grease under the girl's fingernails until she reached into that grocery sack, pulled out 3 folded pages, and asked the auctioneer to read the number stamped behind the starter. That was the first time. All morning, the bidding ring went quiet. The girl's name was Nora Bell Harlan. She had lived most of her life on 480 acres of rolling farm ground near the Barren River, in a white farmhouse with a sagging porch and a machine shed that smelled like old oil, sweet hay, and wet limestone after rain. Her grandmother, Alma Harlan, had worked that land for 27 years. Tobacco first, then corn, then cattle when tobacco money got too thin to trust. Alma was not loud about what she knew. She wrote things down: seed weights, calving dates, tire sizes, weather, names, numbers. Anything that could save a person from being talked over later. Nora had learned that before she learned long division. When Alma died in late summer, the farm did not fall silent right away. Cattle still pressed the gate at dawn. The pump still kicked under the kitchen floor. The wind still pushed loose tin on the machine shed roof. Then the letters started coming. First Commonwealth Bank in Glasgow held an operating note against part of the estate. The balance was mwy bwy bain tam cham nam mwy. Not enough to make the farm worthless, but enough to make men with clipboards speak as if the land had already changed hands. No clear will had been found in the farmhouse. The county paperwork was unfinished. The bank's attorney called it a standard liquidation path. Nora called it people touching things they had not earned the right to touch. The auction was scheduled for the second Saturday in November. Equipment first, household goods after lunch. And if the equipment brought little, the land would be pushed next. Because once land leaves a family in pieces, it almost never walks back whole. Lot 27 was an International Harvester 1086 tractor, built in the late 1970s, broad-shouldered and red under the dust. Alma had bought it used in 1985 for Numman Bonchem from a farm outside Elizabethtown. It had pulled hay wagons, cut fields, dragged calves out of mud, and carried Nora on the fender when she was small enough to be told not to fall asleep. The bank appraisal listed it as a non-running parts tractor. Value, Mutton and High Cham. That number did not make sense to Nora. Not because she understood estate law. Not because she knew auction math. Because 3 weeks before Alma died, she had watched her grandmother climb down from that tractor after raking hay, pat the side panel with 2 fingers, and say, "That old girl is worth more than folks think. Paper says so if they bother looking." After the funeral, while adults argued in rooms where Nora was not invited, she went to the machine shed. For 13 afternoons, she worked in the yellow light that came through the high gap above the sliding door. She swept mouse droppings from shelves. She opened coffee cans full of cotter pins. She sorted twine, receipts, grease pencils, and baling wire fixes that made sense only to someone who had lived there. On the 5th afternoon, she found the tobacco tin. It was not hidden like treasure. Alma would have disliked that kind of drama. It was wired behind the tractor's battery box with a piece of bent hay rake tooth, painted over in dust, exactly where a thief would not look and a farm woman would remember. Inside were 4 things wrapped in freezer paper. A dealer invoice from 1991 showing a transmission and torque amplifier rebuild at Glasgow Farm Equipment. A stamped parts receipt for a new hydraulic pump. A handwritten maintenance ledger in Alma's square, hard-pressed pencil. And a carbon copy of a purchase agreement showing the tractor's full model and serial number. Nora took them to the kitchen table. She cleaned her hands and then got grease on the pages again because the numbers bothered her. Too much to wait. The bank's inventory sheet called Lot 27, an International Harvester 886. The hood decal was half gone, and from one side, if a person glanced fast and wanted the cheapest answer, maybe that mistake could happen. But the stamped serial plate behind the starter did not say 886. The frame tag did not say 886. Alma's dealer paperwork did not say 886. They all said 1086. Nora wrote it down the way Alma had taught her. Inventory says 886. Tractor says 1086. Rebuild not listed. Hydraulic pump not listed. Running condition false. Then she did the part no one expected a child to do. She called Glasgow Farm Equipment from the hallway phone and asked whether they kept copies of old service records. The parts manager knew Alma. Half the county knew Alma. He did not laugh at Nora. He told her to bring the papers in. A day later, he handed her a photocopy of the 1991 work order. The total had been Bangin High Salmui transmission, torque amplifier, hydraulic pump, rear seals bench tested after repair, released in running condition. He also told her something that stayed in her mind. "That tractor ain't pretty," he said, "but pretty ain't the same as value." On auction morning, frost sat silver along the fence wire. Trucks lined the lane before sunrise. Dealers came from Bowling Green and Somerset. Neighbors stood in small knots, speaking low, the way people do when grief has become business. Nora stood near the cattle chute in Alma's old chore coat. The sleeves covered half her hands. The grocery sack was folded under one arm, soft at the edges, from being opened too many times. The bank representative was a man named Curtis Vale. He was clean-shaven, careful, and polite, in the way a closed door can be polite. He carried a brown leather folder and a pen that flashed whenever he turned toward the sun. When Nora asked him to look at the tractor records, he gave her the kind of smile adults use when they have already decided patience will be quicker than listening. "I am sure the assessor handled it," he said. Then he walked away. The tractor came up just before noon. The auctioneer tapped the hood with his palm and gave the description from the sheet. Older International. Rough, non-running parts or restoration, no warranty. Sold as is. The bidding opened at $500. A man in a seed cap raised 2 fingers, 600. 7, 8. Nora lifted her hand at 900. A laugh moved through the back of the crowd. Not loud enough to be called cruel, which somehow made it worse. Curtis Vale looked over his folder but did not speak. At 1100, the auctioneer paused. "You understand this is cash or certified funds today?" he asked her. Nora nodded and unfolded a cashier's check for Hainan Num. Alma had kept emergency money in a flour tin behind the cookbooks, mostly small bills from selling calves direct to neighbors. Nora had deposited it with help from the one person in town who still treated Alma's word like a document. The clerk looked at the check, then at Nora, then at the bank man. That should have been the moment they let her bid and lose. Instead, Nora stepped forward and put the grocery sack on the tractor hood. "I need the description corrected before it sells," she said. The auctioneer blinked. She laid out the purchase agreement, the service record, and her own one-page comparison. Her handwriting was plain, tight, and almost painfully careful. The wind lifted the corner of the service invoice. Nora held it down with 2 fingers, both nails rimmed black from the starter plate. The auctioneer read the first line. Then he read the second. Then he looked at the tractor. Curtis Vale stepped in, still wearing that polite closed-door face, and asked what the problem was. Nora did not argue with him. She pointed to the stamped serial number behind the starter and handed him the purchase agreement. For several seconds, no one moved. A dealer from Bowling Green crouched beside the tractor, wiped the plate with his thumb, and said the number out loud. It matched Nora's page. It did not match the bank's page. That was when the auctioneer stopped talking. Not because a child had raised her voice. She had not. Because the paper had. The sale of Lot 27 was suspended on the spot pending review. By Monday, the county court had received a formal objection to the equipment inventory. By the following week, an independent farm equipment appraiser from Louisville inspected the tractor, verified the model, verified the running condition, and confirmed the 1991 rebuild. His corrected value was Chin Nin Sauchum. The difference did not simply save a tractor. It changed the estate math. Once one appraisal error was proven, the attorney reviewing the file looked again at the equipment list, the hay inventory, and the way the operating note had been attached to the land. Alma's maintenance ledger showed more than repairs. It showed business use, equipment value, cattle counts, hay sales, and a pattern of income the first summary had ignored, because nobody had wanted to read a farm woman's pencil marks. The liquidation slowed. Then it stopped. It took 5 months, 2 hearings, and a legal aid lawyer from Bowling Green who drove an old Volvo with no heat. But the farm was not sold under a rushed valuation. The equipment was reclassified. The operating debt was settled through a supervised payment plan and sale of surplus hay, not by cutting the land apart. Alma's missing will was eventually found in the bottom drawer of a cedar chest, tucked inside an envelope marked simply, Nora, when they need paper. The farm went into a small family trust. Nora was named its beneficiary. People in Barron County told the story in different ways afterward. At the feed mill, some said the bank had tried to steal from a child. At church, some said Alma had planned the whole thing. At the diner, somebody claimed Nora had memorized every serial number on the farm. The truth was quieter than all of that. A woman who had been ignored all her life had taught a girl to keep records so plain that even powerful people had to read them. Nora went back to school the following Monday. She still had chores before the bus. She still broke ice on troughs in winter. She still wore Alma's chore coat until the cuffs finally tore loose. The tractor stayed in the machine shed, not polished, not displayed, not made into a monument. It kept working. Years later, when Nora was old enough to sign papers without anyone bending down to explain them, she kept the tobacco tin on a shelf in the farm office, not as a shrine. As a reminder, land remembers pressure, machines remember hands. And sometimes, the smallest person in the auction ring is the only one carrying the paper that tells the truth.